For many, the impression of life in the US remains frozen behind the filtered lens of movies and TV shows. Neat, orderly neighborhoods, a relaxed, free lifestyle, comprehensive social services, and a populace that appears dignified and elegant in their daily routines. Yet, if you truly plant yourself in the reality of ordinary American neighborhoods, among the working class and small-town residents, you will find that this glossy veneer shatters, layer by layer. In its place emerges a reality filled with absurd, outrageous, and contradictory moments that leave you unsure whether to laugh or cry. These stories lack earth-shattering dramatic conflicts or sensationalist gimmicks. Instead, they are the mundane, everyday realities experienced by millions of ordinary Americans, things they take for granted or have simply become numb to. They represent the raw, often jarring truths of life for the vast majority of expatriates, the local working class, and the middle class. I am an ordinary expatriate who has settled in Champaign, Illinois, a typical small to medium-sized American city in the Midwest. It lacks the bustling glamour of New York or the trendy, social media-fueled vibe of California. Its residents are everyday Americans, university staff, supermarket clerks, assembly line workers, delivery drivers, young renters, and ordinary small-town families. Life here moves at a gentle, down-to-earth pace, yet day after day, it plays host to bizarre incidents that defy conventional wisdom. Over the past decade, I have evolved from a state of initial shock, confusion, and struggle to adapt, to a point where I take these oddities in stride. Now, I can clearly deconstruct the social rules, human logic, and the core of American absurdity that underpin these strange little events. Today, I am sharing a comprehensive narrative that compiles the most authentic, granular, and down-to-earth stories of these bizarre everyday moments I've witnessed over the last 10 years. Delivered with the natural rhythm of conversational storytelling, I vividly recreate every scene, detail, and surreal, laugh or cry moment, allowing everyone to fully grasp the true, unvarnished reality of American life once the glossy halo is stripped away. The beginning of all this absurdity lies hidden in the most mundane morning routines. When living in the U.S., what shatters one's preconceptions isn't the grand social system, but rather the counterintuitive norms and bizarre rules that permeate every aspect of daily life: food, clothing, housing, and transport. The common sense habits we take for granted back home, like drinking a glass of warm water first thing in the morning, simply don't apply here. Instead, there is a set of peculiar, unspoken conventions that locals follow instinctively but outsiders find baffling. In China, hot water is a standard, free, and readily available amenity in convenience stores, restaurants, and public spaces, regardless of the season. In the U.S., however, hot water is a veritable luxury, while ice water is a rigid standard woven into the very DNA of society. Even in the dead of winter, amidst blizzards and sub-zero temperatures, shops, restaurants, offices, and public venues offer only free ice water, never hot water unless specifically requested. During my first winter there, I would head out for my commute feeling the biting sting of the cold wind on my face. The Americans around me would be bundled up in heavy, long-down jackets, knit hats, and thick scarves, fully geared for the cold, yet their lower bodies were invariably clad in shorts or cropped trousers and flip-flops. They would hold a large cup of ice water or iced Americano, their lips flushed red and fingertips stiff from the cold, yet they would still gulp down the ice water without a second thought. It was as if drinking ice water and exposing one's ankles in the freezing cold were essential rituals. To do otherwise was to be an outsider who didn't know the rules. I once walked into a chain coffee shop downtown during a blizzard, feeling a chill in my stomach after waking up. I quietly asked the staff if they could provide a free cup of hot water, no sugar, no milk, no additives, just something warm to settle my stomach. The staff member was stunned, staring at me blankly as if I had made an absurd request that defied the logic of the universe. They asked me to confirm 3 times, "Are you sure you just want hot water? No coffee, no syrup, no foam, no actual product?" After I gave a firm yes, the staff member explained quite earnestly that the store offered no free hot water service and had no such item in their system. To get hot water, one had to order a paid beverage like hot cocoa, black tea, or coffee. Plain hot water, whether room temperature or steaming hot, simply wasn't part of their service. That moment gave me a vivid realization: American eccentricities aren't just isolated incidents but accepted social norms. Here, cheap ice water is available for free self-service everywhere, enjoyed liberally by all, yet the humblest, most basic hot water has become a scarce resource that costs money, or sometimes cannot be bought at all. This inversion of common sense is a daily reality that ordinary people are forced to accept. Even more bizarre than the beverage rules is the chaotic and double-standard nature of American morning commutes. Traffic laws are written with extreme precision and appear fair and impartial, prohibiting random honking, illegal parking, running red lights, and jaywalking, but on the actual streets, a surreal set of standards applies. The balance of rights between pedestrians and vehicles is heavily skewed, creating a unique form of pedestrian supremacy. Here, the moment a pedestrian steps onto a crosswalk, regardless of whether they are running a red light, dawdling on purpose, or looking down at their phone, all vehicles must stop and wait unconditionally. Even if a car is proceeding straight on a green light at a legal speed and on the correct path, should a pedestrian suddenly cross and a collision or scrape occur, the driver bears 100% of the liability. The pedestrian is never held responsible and faces no consequences. I once witnessed an utterly absurd morning commute incident that remains vivid in my memory. During the heavy flow of the morning rush hour, traffic was moving steadily and lawfully through a green light when a middle-aged white man, head down, engrossed in his phone, shuffled carelessly across the road against the red signal. A driver, proceeding normally, slammed on the brakes, the tires screeched against the pavement, and the car barely grazed the pedestrian's sleeve. There was no injury, no impact, just the slightest brush of fabric against the car. What happened next, however, defied all reason. The jaywalker showed not a shred of guilt or apology. Instead, he calmly took photos and videos, called the traffic police to lodge a formal complaint, and arrogantly accused the driver of dangerous driving. The police officer's ruling was even more surreal. Completely ignoring the fact that the pedestrian had violated the law by crossing against the light, the officer held the driver entirely liable, demanding immediate payment of $200 in emotional distress compensation, along with points deducted from the driver's license and a formal traffic violation record. Meanwhile, the jaywalker stood casually by the roadside, chatting and laughing, facing absolutely no criticism, penalty, or accountability. That incident revealed the bizarre, double-standard logic of American traffic. Rules are written for drivers, while pedestrians enjoy absolute immunity, able to walk away unscathed even after flagrant violations. Ordinary drivers commute in a state of constant anxiety, walking on eggshells. Even when they follow every rule, they are forced to pay the price for others' misconduct. This grossly unfair, unspoken rule plays out day after day on streets across America, leaving local drivers numb and resigned to simply accepting it. Beyond the supremacy of pedestrians, the double standards regarding roadside parking are equally absurd. Traffic signs clearly mark yellow no parking zones, fire lanes, and restricted main roads, with rules explicitly stating that violations result in fines and towing. Yet, in reality, the areas in front of shops, roadsides in commercial districts, and main thoroughfares within residential complexes are perpetually packed with vehicles parked temporarily. As long as the driver remains in the car and is ready to move it at a moment's notice, traffic police turn a blind eye and tacitly allow it. Countless car owners brazenly park illegally based on this unwritten rule. Conversely, if an out-of-towner or a novice driver, unfamiliar with these local norms, stops briefly for just a few seconds, they are immediately ticketed and severely penalized. It is a textbook case of double standards, where the ones who get bullied are always ordinary people unfamiliar with the unwritten rules. After surviving a morning commute filled with bizarre regulations, the daily routine at work takes the absurdity of the average American's life to the extreme. I work for a small to medium-sized local service company in Illinois, surrounded by colleagues who are all born and raised locals. There are no complex office politics, no drinking culture, and no hierarchical oppression typical of workplaces back home. Instead, there is a set of workplace rules that are even more rigid, hypocritical, and suffocatingly bizarre. The most draining and pervasive of these is the inescapable, mandatory tipping system. While the common understanding is that a tip is a voluntary gesture of appreciation for excellent service, a token of goodwill, a reward, or a cherry on top, in the U.S., tipping is a blatant, mandatory service charge. It is a rigid obligation tied to everyday consumption for ordinary people, leaving no room for choice. Its scope is ridiculously broad, extending far beyond the usual sectors like restaurants, food delivery, haircuts, and cleaning services. Take the self-service eatery downstairs from my office. The entire process, ordering, picking up food, and clearing away dishes, is done by the customer. There is zero interaction with waitstaff and no one-on-one service. You are simply using the store's equipment and space. Yet, at checkout, the screen still forces you to select a tip tier, fixed options of 15%, 18%, or 20%. There is no option for zero tip or no tip at all. Consumers are compelled to pay extra. Once, during a rushed lunch break, I hurriedly settled my bill with the minimum 15% tip, despite having received no actual service or interaction with the staff. As I stepped out of the shop, a staff member who had been idle the entire time and had never attended to me chased me down. Looking displeased, they pointed out that the standard tip for self-service was 18% and that anything less was disrespectful to the staff. Their tone was self-righteous, as if I had taken unfair advantage or committed a grave social blunder. In that moment, I saw the twisted nature of American tipping culture for what it truly is, not a voluntary gesture of appreciation from the consumer, but a tool for businesses to offload costs and exploit ordinary people. Across most American service sectors, businesses deliberately keep base wages extremely low, sometimes even below the federal minimum, forcing employees to rely entirely on tips for their income. Companies shift the entire burden of payroll costs onto the average consumer. Payment is mandatory regardless of the quality of service, or even the presence of it. If the tip falls short of the worker's expectations, one risks facing cold stares, confrontations, negative reviews, or even malicious retaliation. It extends far beyond dining. Tipping is expected for supermarket bagging, courier deliveries, appliance repairs, plumbing, parking lot attendance, hotel housekeeping, and even document drop-offs. The minimum starts at 15%, with over 20% expected for quality service. For the average person, monthly tipping becomes a fixed, invisible expense, inescapable, unavoidable, and impossible to reason away. One simply has to bear it. The absurd double standards within the workplace are equally baffling. HR departments religiously preach workplace equality, inclusivity, freedom, a rejection of cutthroat competition, and respect for individuality during weekly morning meetings, claiming employees enjoy absolute personal freedom, yet the reality on the ground is the exact opposite. The company is incredibly tolerant of all forms of slacking off. Employees show up in spaghetti-strap tops, shorts, slippers, or pajamas, sport wild hair colors, bring their cats and dogs to work, and spend their time watching videos, chatting, or sneaking out early. Management tacitly accepts and even embraces this behavior, framing it as respect for individual personality and personal freedom. Yet, if anyone actually works hard, volunteers for overtime, finishes tasks early, or proactively hones their professional skills, they are singled out by HR for a serious warning. They are told that excessive effort creates a toxic rat race atmosphere, disrupts team balance, and pressures other colleagues, making it a violation of workplace norms. My colleague Bob, an 8-year veteran of the company, is widely regarded as an eccentric yet ordinary guy, the quintessential embodiment of the American slacker ethos. Despite being healthy, energetic, and well-paid, he lives by a survival strategy of zero effort, zero spending, and total freeloading. Over 8 years, he has never once purchased his own office supplies or household sundries. His first act upon arriving at work isn't to boot up his computer, but to scour the break room, cafeteria, and reception area for freebies, disposable cutlery, napkins, ketchup, salt and sugar packets, coffee sachets, pens, folders, sticky notes, staples, and printer paper. He hoards these public resources in massive quantities, stuffing his desk drawers to the brim and packing the excess to take home for his family's use. For 8 years, he hasn't spent a penny on tissues, tableware, stationery, or condiments. He relies entirely on freeloading from the company. While his colleagues see exactly what he's doing and know the score, no one criticizes or intervenes. In the American workplace, slacking off, extreme selfishness, and freeloading off public resources are viewed as matters of personal freedom and are endlessly tolerated, whereas working hard and showing ambition are seen as disrupting the workplace atmosphere and are strictly discouraged. This completely inverted set of workplace values is the daily reality for countless ordinary American workers. Beyond the workplace, neighborhood life harbors stories of ordinary people whose eccentricities defy belief. The apartment complex where I live is home entirely to working-class families, no tycoons or elites here. While everyone's life appears mundane on the surface, each person has their own surreal way of surviving. Among them, my downstairs neighbor, Alan, stands out as the most extreme, outrageous, and authentic eccentric ordinary person I have ever met in the United States. Alan is 42 years old and works full-time as a supermarket stocker, earning a steady monthly salary of $3,200. He is debt-free, has savings, and enjoys good health with no physical impairments. He faces absolutely no financial pressure. Yet, he lives by a philosophy of zero consumption taken to a fanatical extreme. His life's creed is simple: avoid spending money whenever possible. If you can get something for free, never pay for it. If you can scavenge it, never buy it. For 9 years, he has achieved a lifestyle of 100% zero daily consumption, turning an ordinary existence into something surreal that baffles everyone around him. To eliminate food costs, he has not purchased a single ingredient, snack, or beverage from a supermarket, restaurant, or convenience store in 9 years. His family's meals come entirely from discarded goods sourced from upscale commercial districts and large supermarkets. The U.S. follows a rigid and bizarre commercial rule: any food item nearing its best-by date or remaining unsold by the end of the day, even if the packaging is intact, the ingredients are fresh, and the food is perfectly safe to eat, must be pulled from the shelves and discarded. Discounting, employee takeaways, and donations are strictly prohibited. The items must be treated as trash. Countless high-end steakhouses, boutique bakeries, and organic markets discard massive quantities of perfectly good steaks, salmon, organic produce, fresh bread, imported milk, and exquisite desserts every day. Ingredients that ordinary people would consider precious are classified as waste, destined for destruction under American commercial rules, a level of wastefulness that is truly shocking. Alan has mastered this peculiar system. Every evening after get off work, he changes into tattered, dirty clothes to pose as a homeless person and makes his rounds to the kitchen dumpsters of major commercial districts and supermarket disposal areas, precisely scavenging for discarded ingredients that remain fresh and perfectly packaged. What is truly baffling is that he never scavenged furtively. Instead, he did so openly and with complete composure. He would meticulously wash, sort, store, and cook the ingredients he gathered. Not only did he and his family consume them regularly, but whenever neighbors or friends visited, he would treat them to meals prepared from these salvaged ingredients, dishes that were beautifully plated and thoughtfully cooked. He felt absolutely no embarrassment or sense of inferiority. On the contrary, he took immense pride in sharing his money-saving strategies. In his view, these ingredients were perfectly good, wasted only by rigid commercial rules, so salvaging and eating them was a smart way to live and prevent waste. There was nothing wrong with it at all. Beyond food, he relied entirely on scavenging and freebies for all his daily necessities: free plastic bags from supermarkets, promotional brochures from malls, tissues from shops, office supplies from work, and consumables from public areas, all of which he hoarded in massive quantities. Over 9 years, he never bought a single pack of tissues, tube of toothpaste, bag of rice or flour, or household item. By living a life of absolute zero consumption, he managed to pay off a 30-year mortgage in just 9 months. Even more extraordinary, the socks he wore next to his skin hadn't been replaced in 13 years. He washed and wore them repeatedly, simply mending any holes that appeared rather than spending a penny on replacements. Most surreal of all is that Alan was neither destitute nor forced into frugality. He had ample savings and a stable life. He was simply obsessed with this lifestyle of extreme zero consumption, finding satisfaction in not spending. There is a sense of achievement in being able to live on next to nothing. Within his social circle, quite a few ordinary people follow his lead. They swap tips on where to scavenge, how to stockpile, and how to snag freebies, fostering a niche yet very real, and rather eccentric, lifestyle. While outsiders might find it utterly bizarre, locals view it as the norm, tacitly accepting it. If the neighbors' penny-pinching quirks elicit a mix of amusement and exasperation, then the nightmare that ordinary Americans truly cannot escape, one that is suffocating, surreal, and absurd, is the grotesquely dysfunctional healthcare system. It is a daily pain point universally acknowledged by ordinary Americans as the height of irony and hypocrisy, a system that wreaks havoc on lives, without exception. The outside world often touts American healthcare for its cutting-edge technology, advanced equipment, and superior resources. Yet, these top-tier assets serve only the wealthy and powerful, bearing no relation to the lives of ordinary working-class people. For the average person, American healthcare boils down to 2 keywords: exorbitant costs and inefficiency. The health insurance system appears to offer universal coverage, yet in reality, it is a web of convoluted schemes and traps. Ordinary people find themselves firmly shackled by insurance rules and regulations, exploited at every turn. My childhood friend Jason, an ordinary wage earner like myself, leads a healthy, disciplined life with no underlying medical conditions. Late one autumn night last year, he suffered a sudden attack of acute appendicitis. The abdominal pain was excruciating, leaving him unable to stand or even breathe, so, with no other option, he called for an ambulance. The entire process, emergency care, surgery, and hospitalization, went incredibly smoothly. The minimally invasive surgery was a complete success with no complications, and he was discharged fully recovered after just 6 days. There were no special treatments, no high-end medical supplies, and no critical life-saving interventions involved. It was simply a routine, standard minimally invasive procedure. The final hospital bill caused Jason to instantly collapse in despair. This single sheet of paper totaled $62,000, with itemized charges that defied all reason: $1,300 for a mere 15-minute ambulance ride, $5,000 for standard ER registration, basic x-rays, and a blood count, $31,000 for a routine minimally invasive appendectomy, $21,000 for 6 days in a standard double occupancy room, and $4,000 for basic anti-inflammatories and simple nursing supplies. For an ordinary wage earner making $3,000 a month, while juggling rent and car payments, this astronomical sum was utterly unmanageable. To make matters worse, he encountered absurd health insurance traps. Despite 8 years of paying high premiums on time and in full, never missing a payment, he discovered that his insurance policy imposed an exorbitantly high deductible. With an annual deductible of several $1,000s, most common ailments and routine surgeries failed to qualify for full reimbursement. After a complex calculation, the insurance covered only $10,000, leaving Jason personally liable for the remaining $52,000. The hospital's attitude was cold and uncompromising. There were no installment plans, no hardship assistance programs, and no compassionate grace periods. Failure to pay on time resulted in immediate credit reporting, lawsuits, and forced collection actions. Jason, who had previously enjoyed a stable, debt-free life, was suddenly saddled with massive debt over a common illness anyone might face. With his credit rating on the brink of ruin, he was forced into a years-long struggle to pay off the balance, slashing living expenses, cutting out all leisure activities, and working multiple jobs day and night, as his once happy life was utterly destroyed by a dysfunctional healthcare system. This is not an isolated incident, it is the reality for ordinary Americans. Countless ordinary people around me endure the absurd financial exploitation of the healthcare system day in and day out. For a minor cold or fever, one must book a family doctor appointment 1 or 2 weeks in advance. During this wait, it is common for a minor ailment to worsen into a serious illness. When one finally secures an appointment, the doctor spends a mere 2 minutes asking questions and prescribes a few standard cold pills or anti-inflammatories, yet the bill easily tops $300 to $500. For everyday bumps or scrapes requiring only basic disinfection and a bandage, hospitals charge a minimum of $1,000. Affordable, routine checkups, standard for everyone back home, cost over $3,000 for a full panel in the U.S. A price ordinary families simply cannot afford. Over time, ordinary Americans have been forced into a shared, bizarre survival strategy, toughing out minor illnesses, delaying treatment for major ones, and avoiding medical care at all costs, never setting foot in a hospital unless the situation is life-threatening or they can no longer hold on. The greatest irony is that while Americans pay massive health insurance taxes and bear exorbitant costs, they receive no commensurate medical security. Public hospitals, which claim to serve the public good, charge rates barely different from private ones, yet suffer from low efficiency, perfunctory service, and endless queues. Private hospitals offer excellent service and efficiency but charge outrageously high fees that ordinary people cannot afford. This healthcare system, characterized by extreme double standards and profound dysfunction, is a source of deep, inescapable frustration and absurd tragedy in the lives of ordinary Americans. No one can break the cycle or escape it, leaving them to passively endure the situation and suffer silently. Bizarre and chaotic phenomena permeate the daily lives and social interactions of ordinary Americans. In a nation that champions freedom, equality, and the rule of law, the reality on the ground is often surreal, defined by self-centeredness, unreasonableness, and selfish double standards. Countless seemingly trivial matters reveal an utterly absurd logic of survival. A small shop specializing in community-based creative goods opened near my home with a limited-time launch promotion. The poster clearly stated, 20% off store-wide on opening day. The date, rules, and scope were unambiguous and displayed in the most prominent spot, making the terms immediately clear to everyone. On the second day, a middle-aged local woman came in to shop. At checkout, she insisted that the clerk honor the previous day's 20% discount. The clerk patiently pointed out the rules on the poster, explaining that the promotion was valid only for the opening day, which had already passed, and could not be extended. Despite this simple, clear, and indisputable explanation, the customer instantly lost her temper and flew into a public rage. She pointed at the poster and loudly accused the shop of malicious marketing, bait-and-switch tactics, and scamming consumers. Her language was aggressive and irrational. She completely ignored the clearly marked dates on the poster. Simply because she couldn't get the discount she expected, she branded a legitimate small business as fraudulent, publicly smeared its reputation, and hurled wild accusations, acting out with shameless, unruly behavior throughout the incident. Ultimately, to avoid a dispute or a malicious negative review that could damage the shop's reputation, the frustrated clerk had to compromise and process the transaction with the expired discount, effectively enabling this kind of unreasonable, outrageous behavior. Such self-centered, hypocritical, and domineering consumers are a common sight on American streets. To survive, countless small businesses are forced to repeatedly abandon their rules and make concessions. Over time, this has fostered a distorted consumer ecosystem where customers feel entitled to make unreasonable demands and cause scenes, while merchants are forced into passive submission and must quietly swallow the losses. The everyday thinking and logic of ordinary people are often riddled with absurd stereotypes and self-delusion. I once witnessed a bizarre, laughable incident on the communal lawn of my residential complex that has left a lasting impression on me. The lawns and greenery in the residential complex are lush, often attracting small wildlife such as sparrows, squirrels, and wild rabbits. One afternoon, a white woman was spotted crouching deep in the grass, carefully cradling a small mouse that was already stiff, motionless, and devoid of vital signs. While it was obvious to everyone that the creature had passed away, its body rigid and lifeless, the woman completely disregarded this reality. She gently stroked the mouse while whispering tenderly that it was merely tired, asleep, or taking a brief rest, rather than having left this world. She then gingerly placed the stiff mouse into a portable thermal carrier designed for pets and solemnly made an appointment at a veterinary clinic, intending to seek treatment. Throughout the process, her gaze was reverent and her demeanor earnest. She remained entirely immersed in her own subjective perception, refusing to accept the objective reality visible to everyone else. When others tried to reason with her, she would sternly rebuff them, accusing them of being cold-hearted and lacking compassion for life. This mindset, characterized by extreme self-centeredness, the prioritization of subjectivity over objectivity, and a form of self-delusion, is typical of countless ordinary Americans. They place immense value on their own feelings and cling stubbornly to their personal perceptions. Even when faced with facts or common sense to the contrary, they remain steadfast in their convictions and persist in their chosen course of action, leaving outsiders unable to persuade, intervene, or even comprehend their behavior. The rules governing interactions with wildlife in daily life serve as a prime example of the peculiar, rigid norms found in American culture. In urban residential areas, wildlife and humans coexist closely. Squirrels, raccoons, wild rabbits, wild ducks, vultures, and even small alligators or pangolins can be found everywhere, from city parks and residential lawns to roadside verges and suburban trails. These animals are abundant, unafraid of humans, and roam freely, frequently intruding into homes to forage for food, damage furniture, and disrupt daily life. However, American law enforces incredibly rigid and absurd rules regarding wildlife protection. Ordinary citizens have no right to drive away, capture, harm, or otherwise deal with any wild animal. Even if an animal breaks into one's home, wreaks havoc, causes a nuisance, or threatens personal safety, residents are forced to passively endure the situation. Any attempt at unauthorized intervention risks legal trouble, fines, and liability. To handle a troublesome animal, one must call an official control agency and schedule a visit from professionals, a process plagued by long queues, scheduling delays, and abysmal efficiency. It can take anywhere from a few days to half a month for help to arrive, leaving residents helpless and without recourse as the animal runs wild, causing chaos and destruction. I once had a neighbor whose home was frequently invaded by raccoons that stole food, shredded the sofa, and knocked over household items. Despite trying to schedule a removal service for 2 weeks, no one ever came, forcing the neighbor to simply swallow the losses without daring to intervene personally. Even more absurd is the double standard regarding the natural ecosystem. The law offers extreme protection to wildlife, forbidding human interference even when animals cause trouble or harm, yet everyone turns a blind eye to, and tacitly accepts, the brutal slaughter inherent in the laws of nature. I once witnessed a raw, natural kill in a suburban wetland park. A vulture circling low spotted a pangolin on the lawn, then rapidly swooped down to seize and kill it. The scene was brutally real. Dozens of tourists stopped to watch, yet no one intervened, stopped the attack, or attempted a rescue. Everyone simply accepted the law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, turning a blind eye even to the bloody carnage. This combination of extreme regulatory rigidity and profound, indifferent acceptance creates a truly surreal version of everyday American life. The pricing structure and logic regarding labor services in the U.S. defy common sense and create a bizarre, unique double standard. Luxury goods, high-end cars, electronics, and imported name-brand products are surprisingly affordable, often within easy reach of the average person, yet basic essential services, manual labor, and on-site repairs come with exorbitant, sky-high price tags that far exceed the average person's means. Simple car maintenance or minor repairs can incur labor costs that dwarf the vehicle's monthly payment. A minor household plumbing leak, a loose electrical connection, or a small appliance glitch triggers a starting fee of $300 just for a service call, with actual repairs easily running into the thousands. Services like moving, cleaning, heavy lifting, and landscaping all command absurdly high fees. Yet, these steep costs rarely guarantee quality. Shoddy, inconsistent work is the norm. Repair technicians often perform perfunctory inspections and slapdash fixes before rushing off, all while demanding full payment with zero room for negotiation. Ordinary people pay astronomical sums without receiving commensurate service, often finding themselves with no recourse or effective way to complain. Over time, average Americans have been forced to become jacks of all trades, learning to handle plumbing, electrical work, appliance troubleshooting, furniture assembly, car maintenance, and home repairs on their own. They would rather spend vast amounts of time and energy muddling through repairs themselves, or simply endure the inconvenience of a broken item, than book a professional service call. This necessity has effectively turned countless ordinary citizens into all-around handymen. The prevalence of DIY culture in American households stems not from a genuine love of manual work, but from a reluctant response to the absurd economics of labor costs. Bizarre rules governing the rental market also place an overwhelming burden on young people and new residents. While the U.S. rental system appears mature and standardized, it is actually heavily skewed in favor of landlords and exploitative toward tenants, with double standards embedded in every aspect of the process. The terms of the rental contract are draconian, imposing exhaustive restrictions on the tenant. Rent must be paid in full and on time, with immediate fines for any delay. Strict adherence to housing rules is mandatory, prohibiting unauthorized renovations, overnight guests, minor disturbances, or keeping banned pets, and the entire security deposit is forfeited upon move-out for even the slightest wear and tear, such as minor wall scratches or floor scuffs. Any violation triggers immediate penalties, fines, eviction, and blacklisting, leaving absolutely no room for leniency. In stark contrast, the landlord enjoys virtually unlimited rights and minimal obligations, holding absolute authority and control. They can arbitrarily raise the rent without reason or warning, leaving the tenant with no power to negotiate or refuse. They can invade the tenant's privacy by entering the premises without permission under the guise of inspections or repairs, and they can endlessly delay or perfunctorily handle repairs for utility failures, broken appliances, or aging facilities, completely disregarding the tenant's living experience while leaving them with no avenue for complaint or recourse. Rental platforms, property management, and regulatory bodies all invariably side with the landlord, placing the full burden of restrictive rules on the tenant. Ordinary renters are forced to passively accept unfair terms and silently endure outrageous exploitation, year after year facing the routine woes of rent hikes, infringed rights, and forfeited deposits. After a decade of living immersed in this environment, I have witnessed countless instances of the absurdity and helplessness faced by ordinary Americans. I have seen neighbors with steady incomes who were obsessed with extreme frugality, going 9 years without buying groceries and 13 years without replacing their socks. I have seen helpless friends, who faithfully paid their health insurance premiums every year, plunged into massive debt and seeing their life trajectories completely derailed by a run-of-the-mill illness. I have observed an inverted workplace culture where diligent effort leads to disciplinary talks, while slacking off and goofing around are tolerated. I have encountered distorted consumer norms where mandatory tips are charged despite a total lack of service, and customers are berated for not tipping enough. I have seen surreal traffic rulings where pedestrians face no consequences for reckless violations, yet law-abiding drivers are held fully liable for damages. I have witnessed the chaotic reality of unreasonable, tantrum-throwing consumers forcing merchants into submission. I have seen bizarre daily behaviors where people ignore objective facts, preferring self-delusion and self-gratification. I have seen rigid rules that allow wildlife to run rampant and disturb residents while stripping humans of the right to intervene. I have seen an absurd pricing structure characterized by exorbitant labor costs and rock-bottom commodity prices. I have seen biased rental regulations that favor one party while exploiting ordinary people. Countless trivial, authentic, and endlessly recurring oddities piece together the raw, unvarnished reality of everyday life here. There is no trace of the freedom and ease seen through a filtered lens, no imagined equality or beauty, and none of the comprehensive social safety nets often rumored to exist. Instead, one finds pervasive double standards, deep-seated societal distortions, layers of life-constraining shackles, and a pervasive sense of numb, exhausting resignation. The most bizarre aspect of this land is never any single person or event, but rather an entire absurd system, entrenched and self-perpetuating, that specifically targets the ordinary public, workplaces that tolerate laziness while suppressing effort, a consumer culture that mandates payment without valuing service, a healthcare system that touts universal access while actually fleecing the public, traffic rules that preach compliance but apply double standards, a lifestyle that champions freedom while imposing constraints, and regulations that claim fairness while actually tilting the scales. Beneath the polished veneer of civilization lies the reality of countless ordinary people, day after day of compromise, adaptation, grumbling, and numbness. Here, everyone loudly champions freedom and equality, yet lives under rules that are anything but free or equal. Everyone aspires to a dignified life, yet is forced to accept a daily reality rife with absurdity, irrationality, and injustice. Everyone detests the cutthroat rat race and double standards, yet has no choice but to passively assimilate, silently comply, and remain powerless to resist. This is the unvarnished, authentic daily life of the ordinary American, stripped of all halos and filters. There are no dramatic highs and lows, only the relentless, grinding, absurd, yet undeniably real minutiae of existence. Millions of ordinary people are trapped in this rigid, dysfunctional system, grumbling and adapting, living and burning out, in an endless cycle that defines a uniquely complex and bittersweet slice of American life, shared by countless others who have put down roots here. A chronicle of 10 years in the lives of ordinary people, deep, authentic, and utterly unique. Mundane yet surreal, commonplace yet bizarre, filled with the minutiae of daily life that strike a chord deep within. This is the true reality of life in America. My name is Riley, I'm 28 years old and live in Columbus, Ohio, a quintessential Midwestern city. It's not particularly bustling, lacking the frenzy of Silicon Valley or the restless hype of New York. Instead, it's a place filled with ordinary wage earners, middle-class families, and local shopkeepers. I lead a completely standard life, a 9-to-5 office job, car and student loan payments, and a rental in an aging apartment complex on the outskirts of town. There have been no dramatic life-altering adventures or turbulent romantic sagas. Yet, over the 8 years I've lived here, immersed in the daily rhythm of this land, I've gradually come to recognize the pervasive absurdity and eccentricity hidden beneath the mundane surface of everyday life. The trivialities that might seem baffling or utterly bizarre to outsiders have long since become the norm for me and the millions of ordinary Americans around me. These aren't the sensational, freakish stories designed to grab attention online. Rather, they are real, granular, and omnipresent, piecing together a picture of ordinary American life that is at once authentic and surreal. Today, I'm going to share the full story of these eccentric daily experiences, spanning everything from food, clothing, housing, and transport to work, socializing, healthcare, and neighborly relations, so that everyone can see the true face of everyday American life, stripped of all filters. All manner of absurdities often begin on the most ordinary of mornings. For me, every workday morning is a tug-of-war against the bizarre, forced norms of American life. No one here is naturally inclined to rise early and join the rat race. Yet countless unwritten, invisible rules create a jarring disconnect in the daily lives of ordinary people. The old apartment building where I rent lacks a centralized heating system. Ohio winters bring bone-chilling winds, with outdoor temperatures frequently plunging below -10 degrees Celsius in the early hours. Yet, even as fine snow drifts outside, the city's convenience stores, coffee shops, and apartment hallways maintain that peculiar, quintessentially American standard, interiors that are perpetually stifling and dry, and ice water that is omnipresent. Countless times, I have pushed open the door to the convenience store downstairs on a freezing winter morning, only to be met with a scene that defies all logic. Passers-by clad in heavy, long-down coats and wrapped in wool scarves, yet sporting shorts and flip-flops, clutching cups of ice water or iced Americanos filled to the brim with ice. From schoolchildren to commuters, almost everyone follows suit, as if, in this land, dressing for sub-zero winter. Drinking iced water year-round is a survival rule ingrained in the very bones of the culture. Even when lips turn purple and limbs go stiff from the cold, one would never dream of asking for a cup of hot water. When I first arrived in the U.S., I once politely asked a barista at a chain coffee shop if I could have plain hot water instead of coffee, as I was suffering from a touch of stomach chill early in the morning. The employee stared at me in bewilderment, as if I had made a request that defied the natural order of the universe. After confirming 3 times, "You just want hot water? No coffee, no sugar, no milk?" And receiving an affirmative answer, they still looked hesitant as they explained that the shop didn't provide free hot water. To get it, I would have to pay for a hot cocoa base, as plain hot water wasn't on the menu. That moment gave me my first real taste of how the bizarre quirks of American daily life aren't manufactured on purpose, but are instead strange, unspoken conventions woven into the very fabric of society, norms that everyone simply accepts. Here, cheap iced water is available for free everywhere and taken for granted, while the humblest plain hot water has become a scarce specialty drink that must be purchased. My daily life is filled with countless such instances where the ordinary is turned upside down. The morning commute serves as a showcase for America's bizarre traffic quirks. My 20-minute drive to work, covering just a few kilometers, invariably exposes me to chaotic scenes that defy common sense yet are tacitly accepted by everyone. While American traffic regulations appear strict on paper, in reality, they are riddled with double standards and loopholes. Official rules explicitly forbid indiscriminate honking, random curbside parking, and jaywalking, yet, in practice, the street fronts of shops are constantly clogged with vehicles making quick stops. Even where yellow curbs mark no parking zones, traffic officers usually turn a blind eye as long as the driver remains in the car, ready to move it at a moment's notice. The rules regarding pedestrians are the most absurd of all. Here, pedestrians wield absolute right-of-way supremacy. Even if someone jaywalks against a red light, the moment they step onto the crosswalk, all vehicles must stop unconditionally and wait. If you are driving straight through a green light and a pedestrian suddenly darts out, any resulting collision, even a minor scrape, places full liability on the driver, without exception. I once witnessed a truly farcical commuting incident. A middle-aged man in flip-flops, head down and scrolling through his phone, ignored a red light and walked straight across a main road. A car driving normally slammed on its brakes but still lightly grazed the man's clothing. Far from apologizing, the man indignantly took photos for evidence and calmly called the police. When the officers arrived, they completely ignored the fact that the pedestrian had run a red light. Instead, they ruled the driver fully at fault, ordering him to pay the pedestrian $200 in compensation for emotional distress and deducting points from his license. The pedestrian bore absolutely no responsibility, standing casually by the roadside and watching as the driver helplessly accepted the penalty. Such outrageous rulings are the norm locally. Seasoned drivers are long past the point of surprise, having tacitly accepted the bizarre unwritten rule that the pedestrian is always right. Even when a pedestrian is the one violating the rules, the motorist must unconditionally shoulder all the risk. This heavily skewed system forces countless ordinary drivers to commute with extreme caution, feeling as though they are walking on thin ice. The daily routine at the company truly epitomizes the absurdity of ordinary American life. I work for a small to medium-sized local trading firm where most employees are native-born Americans. While the workplace lacks the complex social dynamics and interpersonal politics often found in China, it operates under a set of rules that are far more bizarre, rigid, and riddled with double standards. First and foremost is the tipping culture that permeates every service interaction and workplace scenario, a peculiar custom that newcomers find baffling but to which locals have long since become desensitized. To my mind, a tip is a voluntary token of appreciation for excellent service, a gesture of goodwill or a pleasant surprise. In the U.S., however, tipping is effectively a mandatory service charge, an obligatory expense dictated by unwritten rules that leaves no room for actual choice. This applies not only to common situations like dining out, food delivery, haircuts, and cleaning services, but also to things like using self-service kiosks downstairs, having groceries scanned and bagged, parking services, and even home appliance repairs or package deliveries. All of these come with mandatory tipping options, starting at a minimum of 15% and rising to 18% to 20% for quality service. If you dare to skip the tip or leave too little, you are highly likely to face direct confrontation or cold stares from the service provider, or even suffer malicious negative reviews and retaliation in future service interactions. I once went alone to a nearby fast casual chain restaurant during my lunch break. The entire process, ordering and picking up the food, was self-service, with no one-on-one assistance from staff. Yet, when it came time to pay, the screen forced a choice of tips, fixed at 15%, 18%, or 20%, with no option for no tip. In a moment of oversight, I selected the lowest tier. As I left, a staff member, who hadn't interacted with me at all during the meal, actually chased me out the door. Looking visibly displeased, they reminded me that the tip didn't meet the store's policy, insisting that quality self-service warranted an 18% tip. Their tone was one of entitlement, as if I had taken unfair advantage or committed a grave social faux pas. That moment completely reshaped my understanding. In the U.S., even with zero service and a purely self-service experience, tipping remains an unavoidable, mandatory obligation. Even more absurd is the fact that many service workers earn a base wage far below the local minimum, relying almost entirely on tips for their income. This has created a distorted industry ecosystem where businesses suppress base wages and shift labor costs entirely onto consumers. Customers are forced to foot the bill for everything, even if the service is perfunctory or the experience abysmal, they must still pay the full tip. Day after day, these warped rules squeeze the budgets of ordinary Americans, a system everyone knows is unreasonable, yet no one can break, leaving them with no choice but to accept it. Beyond the tipping system, the company's workplace etiquette and rules are rife with bizarre double standards. During daily morning meetings, HR repeatedly emphasizes workplace equality, inclusivity, freedom, the elimination of discrimination, and respect for individual choices, claiming that all employees, regardless of age, gender, race, or personality, enjoy absolute freedom and equality. Yet, in actual practice, the reality is one of harshness and contradictory double standards. The company permits employees to dress however they please. Some show up in camisoles, shorts, or flip-flops, while others sport multicolored hair or flamboyant accessories. Some even bring pet dogs or cats to their workstations. Management tacitly accepts and accommodates all of this, framing it as respecting individual freedom. However, they impose pathologically strict demands regarding the minutiae of the work itself. I was once privately reprimanded by HR for turning on my computer 2 minutes early after my lunch break to handle some work. I was told that excessive overtime and encroaching on personal break time fostered a negative workplace atmosphere and violated company policies on balancing work and rest. Meanwhile, other colleagues spent their work hours slacking off, scrolling through videos, chatting idly, or even sneaking out early, yet faced no consequences as long as they weren't caught in the act. The most outrageous case was my colleague Bob, a veteran employee with 7 years at the company whose daily routine was the absolute pinnacle of workplace eccentricity. For 7 years, he followed an unvarying morning ritual. First, he would fetch a cup of coffee from the break room and grab some breakfast from the cafeteria. Upon returning to his desk, his first act wasn't to start working, but to tear open the dozens of condiment packets he carried with him: salt, pepper, ketchup, soy sauce, along with disposable napkins and plastic cutlery, dumping them all into a desktop organizer. He stockpiled these free supplies day in and day out without fail. He never bought his own utensils, seasonings, or tissues, relying entirely on the company's complimentary stock year-round. He would even pack up his surplus stash to take home for his family to use. This routine remained unchanged for 7 years. Everyone knew about his bizarre habits, yet no one criticized or intervened, because in the American workplace, personal lifestyle choices are granted boundless tolerance, whereas proactively working hard is often viewed as an anomaly that disrupts the workplace balance and creates pressure through cutthroat competition. This inverted workplace logic left me feeling, time and again, a sense of absurdity and powerlessness. Life in the neighborhood outside of work hours is filled with the kind of eccentricities unique to Americans. The complex where I live is home to ordinary working-class families, no tycoons or elites here. While everyone's life might seem mundane on the surface, each person has their own bizarre quirks. The most memorable of them all is Joe, my middle-aged next-door neighbor. Joe is an ordinary supermarket stocker with a modest salary, yet he practices a money-saving lifestyle so extreme it defies all logic. He is easily the most eccentric ordinary person I've ever met in the U.S. At 42, Joe is healthy, able-bodied, and steadily employed, yet he adamantly refuses to spend money on anything, fully committing to a philosophy of extreme frugality. For 9 straight years, he hasn't bought a single item of food or household goods from a store or restaurant. Instead, he sources everything he eats and uses from the dumpsters of high-end restaurants and boutique supermarkets. To successfully scavenge high-quality goods, he keeps a set of tattered clothes. Every evening after get off work, he changes into these rags to pose as a homeless person, prowling the back alleys of upscale commercial districts and supermarket waste areas. High-end restaurants discard vast quantities of unsold premium ingredients daily: unopened organic salads, fresh avocados, grapes, steaks, and baked goods, while supermarkets pull perfectly edible, well-packaged snacks, milk, and frozen foods from the shelves as they approach their sell-by dates. Under strict U.S. food regulations, these items, which we would consider high-quality food, must be discarded if they pass their peak sell-by date or fail to sell that day. Resale and employee takeaways are strictly prohibited, leaving disposal as the only option. Joe has capitalized on this regulatory loophole, showing up like clockwork every day to salvage these discarded yet perfectly good supplies. What is even more bizarre is that Joe not only regularly consumes food scavenged from dumpsters himself, but whenever friends or neighbors visit, he unhesitatingly serves them meals made from these salvaged ingredients, meticulously plated, carefully cooked, and hospitably presented, without a shred of embarrassment or discomfort. In his view, the food is clean, intact, and of perfectly good quality. It was merely discarded due to commercial regulations, making it a waste to throw away, and scavenging it is the ultimate way to save money. Beyond food, all his household goods and supplies come from free items found in public spaces: tissues, pens, and folders from work, plastic bags from supermarkets, promotional brochures from malls, and disposable cutlery from restaurants. He collects and stockpiles them all. Over 9 years, he hasn't bought a single pack of tissues, a pen, or a bag of rice or flour. Through this extreme scavenging and hoarding, he managed to pay off a 30-year mortgage in just 9 months. Meanwhile, he hasn't replaced his socks in 12 years, washing and wearing them repeatedly, refusing to discard them even when worn out and tattered. Such an extreme, surreal approach to frugality would seem absurd in any country, yet within his social circle, quite a few peers emulate him, sharing tips on scavenging locations and hoarding techniques, and forming a niche but very real, eccentric lifestyle. What shocked me most was that Joe is not destitute or unable to afford things. He has a stable income, property, and savings. He is simply obsessed with this extreme frugality, deriving a sense of achievement from living with zero consumption. This twisted fixation on a specific way of life completely shattered my understanding of the everyday lives of ordinary people. Living in the United States, perhaps the most suffocating, surreal, and ubiquitous absurdity of daily life lies in the outrageous rules of the healthcare system, a nightmare no ordinary American can escape and a deeply ironic social reality. While the outside world often perceives U.S. healthcare as technologically advanced and resource-rich, the experience for the average citizen is defined by exorbitant costs, inefficiency, and double standards, a situation bordering on the surreal. Almost every ordinary American I know both fears and loathes the system yet feels utterly helpless, forced to passively endure unreasonable regulations and astronomical expenses. My friend Chris, an ordinary wage earner like myself who leads a healthy, disciplined life, never imagined a minor illness could plunge him into a financial crisis. Last autumn, Chris suffered a sudden attack of acute appendicitis. The abdominal pain was so excruciating in the dead of night that he could neither stand nor breathe. With no other option, he called emergency services and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. The entire process, emergency response, treatment, and hospitalization, went smoothly. The surgery was a complete success with no complications, and he was discharged fully recovered after just 6 days. However, the moment he processed his discharge and received the bill, he completely broke down, consumed by utter despair. A single hospital bill totaled $60,000, with a breakdown of costs that was utterly preposterous. $1,200 for an ambulance ride lasting barely 10 minutes, $4,800 for standard emergency registration and examinations, $30,000 for a routine minimally invasive appendectomy, $20,000 for 6 days in a standard hospital room, and another $4,000 for basic medications and nursing supplies. For an ordinary wage earner with a monthly salary of just over $3,000 and the burden of daily living expenses, this cumulative total was nothing short of an astronomical sum. Even more absurd are the rules governing U.S. health insurance. While it appears that coverage is universal and everyone is insured, the system is actually riddled with traps and deceptive practices. Chris paid his hefty premiums on time, month after month, without fail, yet, when the time came to actually claim reimbursement, he discovered deductibles so exorbitantly high that most routine treatment costs were ineligible for coverage. Ultimately, his insurance covered only $10,000, leaving him solely responsible for the remaining $50,000, a massive debt with no options for installment plans, fee reductions, or social assistance. The hospital's stance was cold and uncompromising. Failure to pay on time resulted in immediate credit reporting and lawsuits. Left with no choice, Chris, who had previously enjoyed a stable, debt-free life, was forced to shoulder this crushing medical debt and embark on a long, grueling journey of repayment. A once orderly and secure life was completely shattered by a common, minor illness. And this is far from an isolated case. This is the medical reality for ordinary Americans. Countless people around me have endured similar, almost surreal experiences. For a mild cold or fever, one might wait 1 or 2 weeks just to see a primary care physician, only to be handed a bill for hundreds of dollars after a brief consultation and a few standard cold pills. A minor bump or scrape requiring simple disinfection and a bandage at a hospital can easily cost over $1,000. Most absurd of all are routine checkups. Basic exams that are affordable and widely available in China can cost thousands of dollars in the U.S., a price tag far beyond the means of the average family. Over time, most ordinary Americans have adopted peculiar survival habits, toughing out minor ailments, delaying treatment for serious ones, avoiding medical care whenever possible, and refusing to set foot in a hospital unless their life is in immediate danger. Even more ironic is the double standard of the U.S. healthcare system. Emergency rooms are perpetually overcrowded with hours-long waits, and medical staff, while often inefficient and dismissive, charge exorbitant fees. Public hospitals, ostensibly dedicated to the public good, charge rates comparable to private facilities yet lack their service quality and efficiency. Ordinary people spend a lifetime paying for health insurance, only to end up afraid to fall ill or seek medical help, firmly shackled by a dysfunctional system. This is a deeply frustrating and absurd tragedy embedded in the daily lives of ordinary Americans, a reality of life that outsiders can scarcely imagine. Bizarre incidents in everyday shopping and social interactions are a constant feature of my life in the United States. Beneath the surface of this seemingly free, equal, and civilized nation lie countless examples of rigid, hypocritical, and irrational street-level logic that leave one both amused and exasperated. I once encountered a particularly outrageous middle-aged female customer at a small boutique in the city. It was the shop's opening day, and a clear promotional poster was displayed at the entrance, stating, 20% off store-wide today, in-store customers only. The dates and rules were unambiguous and easy to understand. Yet, after selecting her items, the woman insisted at checkout that the opening day discount be applied. When the clerk patiently explained that the promotion was valid only for that specific day, and had since ended, she instantly lost her temper. She flew into a public rage, pointing at the poster and loudly accusing the shop of maliciously misleading consumers, bait-and-switch fraud, and commercial entrapment. Her language was aggressive and irrational. She completely disregarded the clearly marked dates and terms. Simply because she couldn't get the discount she had expected, she arbitrarily branded the shop as fraudulent, eventually storming out and slamming the door, leaving behind a bewildered clerk and a crowd of onlookers. Such unreasonable, self-centered customers are a common sight on American streets, a phenomenon to which countless business owners have long since become accustomed. To avoid disputes or malicious complaints, many small shops even abandon their own rules, compromising and yielding to unreasonable demands, thereby fostering a deeply distorted consumer ecosystem. Beyond that, the everyday mindset and logic of Americans are often characterized by extreme rigidity and a surreal quality. I once encountered a bizarre, almost comical incident in my residential complex's communal garden. There was a patch of greenery where sparrows and squirrels occasionally appeared. One day, I saw a white woman crouching by the grass, gingerly cradling a motionless mouse. The creature was stiff and still, clearly dead. I expected her to bury the animal gently, but instead, she stroked it tenderly while whispering, "It's just too tired, it's sleeping and resting, not gone." She then carefully placed the stiff mouse into a portable pet carrier, solemnly preparing to take it to a veterinary clinic for an examination. Throughout the process, her gaze was earnest and her demeanor reverent. She was completely immersed in her own perception of reality, ignoring the obvious facts visible to everyone else. This kind of self-deluding, reality-detached mindset is a microcosm of daily life for many ordinary Americans. They place immense value on their own feelings and cling stubbornly to their personal perceptions. Even when faced with objective facts, they steadfastly follow their own convictions, impervious to persuasion or intervention from others. Daily life and travel in the U.S. are filled with countless bizarre rules and chaotic situations that defy conventional logic. Wildlife is ubiquitous here, fully integrated into human living spaces. Squirrels, wild rabbits, raccoons, and vultures are commonly seen in city parks, residential lawns, and roadside greenery. They are numerous and unafraid of humans, sometimes even venturing into homes to forage or cause damage. Yet, American laws strictly protect wildlife, prohibiting private citizens from driving them away, harming, or capturing them. Even when animals invade homes, destroying furniture, stealing food, or causing a nuisance, ordinary people have no right to handle the situation themselves and must instead contact specialized wildlife control agencies. However, these agencies are often bogged down by backlogs and delays, leaving residents with little choice but to endure the unchecked disturbances caused by the wildlife. I once witnessed a scene in a suburban park that was both shocking and absurd. A pangolin moving across the lawn was spotted by a vulture circling low overhead and was ultimately devoured by it. Throughout the entire ordeal, no one intervened or stopped it. Tourists simply stood by, watching quietly and taking photos. Everyone tacitly accepted the natural law of survival of the fittest. Even amidst such brutality, no one stepped in. This extreme adherence to nature and rigid observance of rules, intertwined with the chaotic double standards of daily life, creates a uniquely American brand of absurdity. Then there is the logic of prices and consumption in the U.S., which is baffling to the point of incomprehensibility. Luxury cars, high-end designer goods, and electronics are so cheap that ordinary people can afford them with little effort, yet basic services, manual labor, and routine repairs come with exorbitant price tags. Car repair costs can far exceed monthly car payments, and simple tasks like appliance repair, drain unclogging, or home inspections carry a starting fee of hundreds of dollars just for the service call. The sheer cost of labor defies all common sense, leading many ordinary Americans to figure out repairs themselves or endure the inconvenience of broken items rather than hire a professional. Yet, despite these high fees, the quality of service is often inconsistent and shoddy. High prices for low quality have become the norm, leaving ordinary people trapped in a cycle of frustration and unreasonable consumer pitfalls. The bizarre rules of renting also place an overwhelming burden on countless young people. In the old-style apartment where I lived, the rent rose year after year, and the landlord held absolute power. Lease terms were harsh and one-sided. Tenants had to pay full rent on time, strictly follow housing regulations, and were forbidden from altering the property or hosting overnight guests without permission. Violations resulted in fines or eviction, whereas the landlord could raise the rent arbitrarily, enter the apartment for inspections at will, and delay repairs on broken facilities indefinitely. Tenants had no recourse for defending their rights, as rental platforms, property management, and regulatory bodies all sided with the landlord, leaving ordinary renters to passively accept unfair terms and silently endure unreasonable treatment. What strikes me as most absurd is the sense of fragmentation in the lives of ordinary Americans. Here, everyone pursues freedom, equality, individuality, and inclusivity, constantly paying lip service to respect and human rights. Yet, when it comes to the minutiae of daily life, the reality is one of extreme selfishness, double standards, apathy, and rigidity. In the workplace, all manner of eccentric behaviors are tolerated, while genuine ambition and hard work are frowned upon. In consumer culture, tipping is mandatory despite a lack of guaranteed basic service quality. The healthcare system boasts of being advanced and accessible, yet ordinary people are terrified of falling ill and lack the means to seek treatment. Traffic regulations emphasize safety and order, yet the system indulges pedestrian entitlement and applies rules inconsistently. And while wildlife and the natural order are fiercely protected, the daily struggles of ordinary people are ignored or met with indifference. I have known neighbors on meager incomes who scrimp to the extreme, going 9 years without buying groceries and 12 years without replacing their socks, friends who paid their health insurance premiums faithfully, only to be plunged into massive debt by a minor illness, and workplaces where slacking off was tolerated while hard work led to disciplinary talks. I have encountered absurd rules requiring mandatory tips for self-service, where failing to pay invited confrontation, surreal legal rulings where pedestrians running red lights acted self-righteously while drivers following the rules were held fully liable, outrageous customers making public scenes and accusing shops of fraud over minor discounts, and a stubborn resident who insisted on taking a dead rat to the vet, convinced it was merely asleep. These trivial, authentic, and recurring oddities, devoid of earth-shattering drama, precisely piece together the true reality of life for ordinary Americans. It is a life stripped of the idealized freedom and beauty seen through a filter, or the imagined prosperity and ease. Instead, there are only omnipresent absurd rules, deeply ingrained social double standards, inescapable shackles of daily existence, and the lives of countless ordinary people forced into numbness, adaptation, and exhausting internal struggle. After 8 years of living in the United States, transitioning from initial shock, bewilderment, and struggle to a state where I now take everything in stride, I have finally come to fully realize that the eccentricities of this land are never merely random, isolated incidents. Rather, they are the norm, woven into the very fabric of society and daily life. What is known as American daily life is essentially an accumulation of countless absurd rules and an intertwining of myriad contradictory phenomena. Ordinary people find themselves trapped within this rigid, hypocritical, and outlandish system, repeating a life that is at once mundane and surreal, day in and day out. They grumble about the irrationality while passively adapting to the bizarre rules. This is the truest, most grounded, and least known reality of life for the average American, a blend of the humdrum and the absurd, the ordinary and the outrageous. It is a ceaseless cycle that becomes the most profound, and often the most frustrating, memory for countless expatriates and locals alike.